Legacy, what you leave behind for the next generation. Not just money, legacy is everything you do, the guidance and values you leave behind, along with your family history. It's so much bigger than that. It's physically what legacy do you leave, emotionally, mentally, and even spiritually. Psalms 22:1 says, a good name is to be desired more than great wealth. Favor is better than silver and gold. So what do you want to be remembered for when you die? What legacy do you want to leave? Or for you younger kids, you kind of probably feel like that's a long way from now. Let's maybe reword the question. We could ask, what do you want to be known for? You know, when someone thinks of you, what do you want them to remember about you? In other words, what defines you? What makes you you? Sometimes when I think of what I want to be known for, I think about a Hall of Fame. So I thought, well, how would I define what a Hall of Fame is? Well, I looked it up on Wikipedia. And Wikipedia begins a list of halls or walks of fame with this definition. A wall, hall, or walk of fame is a list of individuals, achievements, or other entities to mark their excellence or fame in their field. Sometimes the Hall of Fame is more figurative and consists of a list of names of noteworthy people and their achievements and contributions. Okay, so there's what a Wall of Fame is, or a Hall of Fame. So, what would you want to be famous for? Would you want your star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame? I don't. Before you spend too much time though thinking about that, I want to remind you that this is a devotional for marine biology. So how on earth am I going to make these connections? Well, let's see. We're studying birds, right? So might they have their own, say, Hall of Fame? I think they should. So I did some research and came up with what I decided to call the Migratory Birds Hall of Fame. You ready for it? All right, here we go. The Migratory Birds Hall of Fame begins with the barhead goose. He is the highest flyer. He can fly above the Himalayan Alps. And then the fastest sustained speed for 4,255 miles, the great snipe can fly 60 miles per hour. Woo! That's a lot of speed. I can't run that fast. Can you? The longest nonstop flight, just never stops, 7,000 miles, goes to the bar-tailed godwit. The farthest flightless march on land by a bird, because it's flightless, 11,000 miles. That's the Adelie penguins. I love penguins, and that's an awesome record to show up there. Longest circular migratory route, 27,000 miles. The short-tailed shearwater does that. But the longest round trip migration, back and forth, 60,000 miles, goes from one pole of the earth to the next pole every single year. That's the longest migration of any animal on the planet, and it is a bird that does it. It's the Arctic tern. And he lives 30 years. Can you imagine how much miles he would log in 30 years, going 60,000 miles a year? So as I thought about this Hall of Fame, I thought, how cool would it be if I could fly like a bird? Why can't we fly? I'd love to fly. I've studied flight and know there are different ways to fly. You can fly in an airplane, a helicopter, even a glider. I got to fly in a glider. I even got to pilot the glider until it was time to land. And then I asked the guy to please take care of that part because I didn't trust that we would land if he left it in my hands. But anyways, you can even fly in a hot air balloon, which is another one of my dreams. Someday I want to do that. Or in a hang glider, another one of my dreams. And then there's even something called a personal flying machine. It looks like a giant drone, and you get in it and you fly in the drone. Not interested. So what about animals? What animals can fly? And do they fly in different ways like we figured out how to fly? Do some fly like helicopters and others like airplanes? Do some glide? What type of flight Hall of Fame could the birds have? So I started thinking about that, and all of a sudden I realized, Hall of Fame for the birds. No, birds aren't the only ones that can fly. We got to open this up. This Hall of Fame has to be more than just birds. In fact, we got to put birds on the list, of course. All sorts of different kinds of birds. But we got to put bats, too. And bats aren't birds. They're mammals. Oh, and insects. And insects aren't birds or mammals. Well, they're insects. But then I started thinking, okay, but we can't just count can they flap their wings to fly. There's some who glide. Just how good of gliders are there in the animal world? Shouldn't they be allowed to be on this Hall of Fame for flight in animals? Yeah, I think we should. We counted the hot air balloon and it doesn't have wings. And we counted the glider. It has wings, but it just glides. The hang glider as well. Fish can fly, and they can glide up to 650 feet. They have fins that look like wings, but they don't flap. They just glide. They just soar. Now, a devil's ray, it's like a manta ray. It's a cartilaginous fish. It also can glide. It pops out of the water. It has a 17-foot wingspan, and it can actually glide. I don't know how far they go. I didn't look that up. But squirrels can glide, right? 150 feet. Something called a calugos. It's a flying lemur. 200 feet is how far it can glide. Snakes, okay, this freaked me out. There's a tree snake in the jungle that can glide. They can glide 300 feet. Okay, wow, that's awesome. I'd like to see it kind of, but not up close. Maybe just from the window of the hotel. There's a Draco lizard. He has retractable wings. Now that is the coolest thing ever. Like if I could fly the kind of wings I want, retractable wings, 160 feet. That little lizard can go. The flying gecko, 200 feet. And get this, Wallace flying frog. Yes, there's a frog that can glide 50 feet. And not only can he glide 50 feet, but he can maneuver like a skydiver. He has his little frog feet out there, and he can actually put them out with their little paddles, and he can direct them just the same way that we've learned how to do skydiving, which I have had a chance to learn how to do, but only indoors. And if you take the STEM class with me, that's our field trip. We go do indoor skydiving, like the Wallace flying frog. But anyways, back to what we were talking about. Evolution tries to tell us these special technical designs had no designer. That the information in the DNA that allowed for the structure and instincts to know how to use them to pull off flying or gliding just came out randomly, unguided, unprogrammed, unplanned. Yet you wouldn't think that an airplane or a glider or a helicopter or the personal flying machines happened by chance. There was a designer behind each of these vehicles. You wouldn't get into one if it had just haphazardly been put together. A programmer was involved, and that a pilot was trained for many years about how to fly it. Looking at God's creation, we see evidence of a designer, a programmer, and even an instructor who gives the animals the knowledge, we call it instinct, to fly or to glide. Evolution also tries to say that given enough years, the ability to fly would be able to come about by chance. But how many animals can fly or glide? And many of these animals manage to do it in different ways. Yet none of them are linked together on an evolutionary tree in such a way as to say the ability to fly came about one time in the past by chance. But rather, one must say the ability to fly came about multiple times in animals, totally unrelated on the evolutionary tree. And the designs are sometimes so similar, it can't possibly have happened just by chance, twice, let alone 3 times, or even more. That's why I love these halls of fame. They all point to the Creator. Just as the Bible says, all creation will do. So back to the question at hand. I'm not completely being random here, but what do you want to be known for? These birds are known for how far they can go in their migration. Or the animals who can fly. That frog is known for the fact he can fly. What would you want to be known for? What kind of hall of fame do you want your name to end up on someday? Well, some things you can control and some things you can't. I can't choose to evolve into an animal that can fly and end up on the Animals Who Can Fly Hall of Fame. And I can't just choose to be tall and end up on the World's Tallest Woman Hall of Fame board, which is another one of my dreams. Contrary to popular belief and the teaching of evolution, animals can't just decide to evolve the ability to fly. Animals cannot decide to change their DNA in any way that would help them survive better. The DNA itself has to have the information there already. Otherwise, it could not be selected for. In other words, there could be a frog out there that doesn't have the webbing that allows it to be able to glide. Well, it's going to be eaten. But the one that does have that DNA information will not be eaten. And yes, will pass on the genetic information for more frogs to have that capability. But the frog didn't do the choosing. The DNA wasn't just written by wishful thinking. It was written by a very intelligent creator who had a plan and a purpose in place. We can't just decide what we would like to have our name on and then just evolve the ability to be that cool. But we can find ourselves on a Hall of Fame for things we do have the ability to do. I can choose to be kind, compassionate, and caring, and if I'm like that, people are going to remember me. I can choose to live for Christ regardless of the consequences, and for that, people will remember me. I can choose to live by faith, and for that, not only could people remember me, I could end up on God's Hall of Fame. These are things I can make conscious efforts to passionately pursue. Paul left a spiritual legacy. Philippians 3:8-9 says this. It says, "Indeed, I count everything as loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord. For his sake I have suffered the loss of all things and count them as rubbish, in order that I may gain Christ and be found in him, not having a righteousness of my own that comes from the law, but that which comes through faith in Christ, the righteousness from God that depends on faith." So Paul set up his spiritual legacy. He wanted to be remembered by, based on his faith. His righteousness came from his faith. And then there's a real, true spiritual Hall of Fame in the Bible, the Hall of Faith. It's all about faith. Faith is like the DNA that we have to have within us so that we can become the kind of person that would be on the spiritual Hall of Fame. Imagine finding your name on this list. What would your faith bring about that would potentially put you on this list? Well, what kind of faith do we see there? First off, Hebrews 11:1 helps us define what faith is, because that's kind of the first thing, is we have to understand what faith is. And so Hebrews 11:1, it says, "Now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see." So it defines for us, okay, that's what faith is. And in verse 2, we see the examples begin. The people who were so full of faith that their names were placed on the Hall of Faith. It says, this is what the ancients were commended for. And then something happens really cool in verse 3. It says something really important. It says that we cannot have faith without understanding that the universe did not evolve by chance, but was formed at God's command, so that what we see was not made out of what was visible. This is faith. And this is how it's worded. It says, by faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. Those are the words of Hebrews 11:3. Memorize them. Never let them go. No matter what college you go to, when they're trying to tell you evolution happened without God, do not lose your faith. Because remember, you want to end up in that hall of faith someday. It's about faith. Faith begins first and foremost at taking God at his word and believing that he is the creator of all, and none of it happened to come into existence by chance. That's the foundation of faith. So let's see what kind of people show up on the Hall of Faith and what their faith looked like. What did they get remembered by? Abel brought God a better offering than Cain. He was murdered by his brother for it, but still, he ended up in the Hall of Faith. Enoch, he pleased God so much, God just took him home. Didn't even have to die. Interesting how two people end up on the Hall of Fame for their faith with two different end results for this part of the journey. But we've got to remember, as we've talked so many times, our journey is eternal. So their story's not done. Okay, God's made them promises. He's going to keep them. There's more to their story. Noah's on the list. He's the heir of righteousness. that is in keeping with the faith. So he got righteousness. He was given an inheritance of righteousness because of his faith. Abraham looked forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. And he inherited the land that he went to by faith. And his wife Sarah considered God faithful, who had made his promise. She got to have children, and not just a few. She had descendants more numerous than the stars of the sky, just as God said. Abraham actually shows up twice on here. Abraham was willing to obey God and sacrifice Isaac because he believed God had the power to raise the dead. So he believed God at his word. God can do this. I believe him. I can live in obedience to God regardless of what he asks me to do because I know he's the God that keeps his promises. Moses' parents get to be on the Hall of Fame for hiding him for 3 months. Moses is on it. And I love what it says about Moses. I have to stop and tell you, with Moses, it's a wonderful picture of someone who lives in their culture completely focused on their faith. Moses refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter, chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasure of sin. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasure of Egypt because he was looking ahead to his reward. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible. Oh, guys, that is the most awesome thing to be Moses and have God stop and say, okay, but I got to tell you about this guy who could have been on the Hall of Fame in the world. He could have been there in Egypt, but he wasn't. He chose instead to be somebody that was mistreated and disgraced so that he could be on God's Hall of Fame. There were lots of people that aren't named that passed through the Red Sea on dry land because they believed God and followed when he said to go. People that saw the walls of Jericho fall when it was completely impossible. Rahab, who wasn't killed along with those who were disobedient because she helped the spies because of her faith in God. There's guys like Gideon and Barak and Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, the prophets. The names go on. And then it gets to the point where there's so many names that they just start telling you what it is they did that got them onto the Hall of Fame. So now forget the names, guys. You just got to hear the list of what kind of things got people on the Hall of Fame. It was by faith they conquered kingdoms, administered justice, gained what was promised, shut the mouths of lions, quenched the fury of flames, escaped the edge of the sword. Their weakness was turned to strength. They became powerful in battle. They routed foreign enemies. They received back their dead to life again. I mean, this sounds like awesome. Yeah, I want to do all these things. This is a great thing. And then it kind of turns again back to the Abel story a little bit. And it says that there's even people on this list who were tortured, faced jeers and flogging, chains and imprisonment. They're put to death by stoning. Wait a minute. This is getting like, really? Do I want to be on this kind of a list? They were sawed in two. I don't think that sounds very fun. Killed by the sword, destitute, persecuted, mistreated, wandered in the desert and the mountains. They lived in caves and holes in the ground. These are people who are on God's Hall of Faith. Verse 38 says, the world was not worthy of them. They were commended for their faith, even though none of them received what was promised in this life. And then it's interesting because of what it says of why they didn't receive what was promised yet. It says they didn't receive what was promised yet because in verse 40, it says, since God had planned something better for us, so that only together with us would they be made perfect. We get to be part of them becoming perfect. We get to be part of this Hall of Fame because of our faith. So what would you like your faith to look like? What would you want to be commended for in that list? If you ask me, what do I want to be remembered by? I'd answer this way. 1, I want to be one who walked with God. 2, I want to be one who talked with God. 3, I want to be one who glorified God in all she did and said. I want to be remembered as one who always points to God, no matter what. I want to be remembered as one who could not keep quiet about Jesus and talked only and always to him and about him to others. I want my life to be so caught up in God that everything I do and say revolves around him. I want him to be my focus, even if it costs me in this world. Casting Crowns came up with a song that I say is one of my favorites because it's this cry of my heart. It's called Only Jesus. And it's this idea of what kind of a legacy do you really want to leave? They say, make it count, leave a mark, build a name for yourself. Dream your dreams, chase your heart above all else. Make a name the world remembers, but all an empty world can sell is empty dreams. I got lost in the light when it was up to me to make a name the world remembers. But Jesus is the only name to remember, and I don't want to leave a legacy. I don't care if they remember me, only Jesus. And I've only got one life to live. I'll let every second point to him, only to Jesus. All the kingdoms built, all the trophies won will crumble into dust when it's said and done. Because all that really mattered, did I live the truth to the ones I love? Was my life the proof that there is only one whose name will last forever? And I don't want to leave a legacy. I don't care if they remember me, only Jesus. Oh, wow. That is what it's about, you guys. That's what my prayer is for my life. And also, my prayer is that someday you guys, each and every one of you, find that that's the best legacy to live. See you next time.